So there are only a few events in history that were so great that the stories of these events have made their way into mythology, oral and written traditions, and they've been incorporated into religious texts. And these stories have been told by multiple civilizations, all living in different parts of the world, all speaking different languages. So, a few examples are the worldwide flood, which is told in the Bible and in the Abrahamic religions, but the story of the worldwide flood predates the Abrahamic religions altogether. Another good example is the story of Christ. The story of Christ is told in the Bible, and many believe that the story of Christ originates with Christianity. But the story of Christ is older than Christianity, and it predates Christianity and all of the Abrahamic religions as well. The dinosaurs, however, aren't mentioned in mythology, nor have they been mentioned in the ancient oral and written records, nor have they been mentioned in the ancient religious texts. The reason for this is because there is no such thing as a dinosaur. What we call dinosaurs today were actually dragons. And most people are comfortable with the idea of dinosaurs roaming the earth, but are skeptical about the idea of dragons. But in actuality, there's more evidence of ancient dragons than there is evidence of the worldwide flood and the story of Christ put together. So dragons are mentioned in the Bible and the other Abrahamic religions, and they're mentioned on all of the other religions around the world as well. And in ancient times, everyone around the world was aware of the existence of dragons. Not dinosaurs, but dragons. So the term dinosaur was first used in 1842 by a man named Richard Owen, who created this term by combining two Greek words, deinos, which means terrible, sauros, which means lizard. So the word dinosaur actually means terrible lizard. So the original terrible lizard, also known as the dragon, is what paleontologists today call dinosaurs. So modern scientists tell us that these dinosaur fossils that are found today are 65 million years old. And they use the method of carbon dating. But carbon dating can only accurately and definitively determine the date of a specimen up to 50,000 years ago. So why do modern scientists keep telling us that dinosaur fossils are millions of years old? Because by their own admission, they can't definitively say that anything is millions of years old. Another obvious problem with their pseudoscientific methods are the fact that dinosaur fossils have been found with soft tissue. But microbes feed on soft tissue after death, and it only takes these microbes a few weeks to eat the soft tissue from an entire carcass. However, because there have been dinosaurs found in recent times with soft tissue, scientists have rearranged their theories, and they now say that some soft tissue, if preserved properly, can last up to 1,000,000 years. And even if you believe that soft tissue can survive for 1,000,000 years, this still proves that scientists have no way to determine if anything is 65 million years old. So why would white people create a false timeline of 65 million years to convince us that these creatures have been long gone for millions of years? They've even created a false narrative that teaches that God created the dinosaurs first, then he wiped them out, then humans came along. Why would they go to such great lengths to indoctrinate us about 65 million year old dinosaurs, meanwhile not mentioning or denying altogether the existence of dragons? What are they hiding? Because if you do a little research on the so-called dinosaurs, according to the United States government, the last dinosaur was captured and kept in captivity in 1766. And this creature survived for 152 years in captivity until it died. So the truth is, dragons were very real. And the reason that white people have created this 65 million year old dinosaur narrative is to hide the fact that dragons were a huge part and played a very huge role in subjugating the white races of the world for thousands of years. And they definitely don't want you to know that the ancient black races used to feed their slaves and their captives of war to these dragons. Even the Moors of Europe had dragons. And white people recorded that when they were fighting the Moors, they weren't just fighting the Moors, but they were also fighting their dragons as well. So white people in Europe left a lot of evidence showing themselves fighting various different types of dragons, some on land, some that could fly, and this picture shows them fighting what appears to be 5 different dragons at one time. This picture shows a giant eating a baby, and you'll notice in the background there's a dragon. This dragon is in a cave, and you'll notice that the woman is holding the dragon by a leash, and the man in the middle is holding a gun. And guns were supposedly invented in 1364, so this wasn't that long ago. And then there's the man stabbing the creature with the sword because it appears that the dragon has ate his friend, who's also wearing the blue tights, and he's in the mouth of the dragon. So white people left behind a lot of evidence in Europe in the illuminated manuscripts and various different other things that they've left behind showing themselves fighting these different types of dragons. And it's no surprise that even the Abrahamic scriptures and the Abrahamic religions all mention various types of dragons. In the Bible, there are dragons that fly, and there are also dragons that come up out of the sea. So the archaeological evidence of dragons found in Europe match the texts and the scriptures found in the Abrahamic religions. In Revelations 12:7, we read that Michael and his angels were fighting with the dragon. In Isaiah 27:1, it talks about the dragon that rises from the sea. So now let's look at the Chinese dragon and the other dragons found in Asia. The ancient Chinese philosopher by the name of Wang Fu describes the dragons as possessing the necks of snakes, the claws of eagles, and the souls of tigers. So there are countless feathered dinosaurs or feathered dragon fossils that have been found in China. Keep in mind that the original Chinese people, or the original inhabitants of Asia, were black. So the original inhabitants of Asia are the people known today as the Aborigines of Australia. They are originally from Asia, and they fled into Australia when the cave beasts began to come out of their caves. But if we go back to the time of Genghis Khan, during this time, Genghis Khan's grandson appointed a white man named Marco Polo to be the governor of a province in China. So at the top, you'll see the shrine of Genghis Khan, who is clearly shown as a black man. So his grandson appoints Marco Polo as governor, and Marco Polo becomes one of the first white men to travel the Silk Road on behalf of the Khan family. But what most people don't know about Marco Polo is that he extensively documented the dragons found in China. He documented huge serpents with 2 short legs, with 3 claws like a tiger, with large eyes and mouths large enough to swallow a man. He said that they had large teeth and that men and animals alike were terrified of these giant serpents. He even recorded the methods used by men to kill them. He said that in the day, because of the heat, the dragons would dwell in caves. And he talks about how they come out at night and they eat anything in their path. When they're done eating, they go to a lake or a river to drink water. And you can see Marco Polo's depiction of the dragons that he saw, or the large serpents. And he documented that the largest one that he's seen was 50 feet in length. Dragons are recorded by all nations in every language. This is a Vietnamese dragon, and this is a tomb painting in Korea. And this is a dragon artifact from India. And dragons are even mentioned in Russian folklore And here's a Japanese dragon. And in Persia, we find 15th century accounts of Rostam and Umar who slayed the dragons. And dragons are well documented in early Islamic manuscripts. So even if we go way back to pre-Islamic Persia and the so-called Middle East, the ancient Sumerians and Babylonians left behind a tremendous amount of evidence showing their interactions with these dragons and flying serpent creatures. In fact, if you go back far enough, you'll even find evidence of serpent people. Even the Bible refers to Egypt and the king of Egypt as a dragon. And the Egyptians showed us the flying serpent and other long-necked dragons, just like the ancient people of the Americas did as well. The ancient Aztecs of South America called the feathered serpent Quetzalcoatl, and the Mayans and the Yucatec called the feathered serpent Cuculan. And this is the pyramid of Cuculan, the feathered serpent. And these are artifacts that are roughly 1,000 years old, left by the Nazca people of Tiahuanaco, showing dragons that are now called dinosaurs. And the Nazca people left behind evidence of their interaction with the dragons. And there's evidence that these dragons and flying serpents existed in North America as well. And they've even found evidence of what they call a dragon dinosaur in Alberta, Canada. So the book of Job describes the Labyrinthian. And most people don't know this, but the book of Job is actually the oldest book of the Bible. But the description given of the Labyrinthian is just like that of a dragon. It exhales fire and smoke. Even the Greeks show us giant sea serpents eating people and flying dragons that breathe fire. Some of the earliest Christians became saints upon their death because they killed dragons. Here's one of the earliest known images of the so-called Jesus Christ and the saints, and you can see that they're slaying a dragon. And you'll also note that Jesus Christ doesn't have a face. His face is the sun. And I know that some people, no matter how much evidence you show them, will still believe that dragons are just legends of mythology. But the truth is that the ancient black civilizations of the earth who recorded everything knew nothing of any such creature that we call a dinosaur. But they were well aware of literal dragons, various types of dragons, some that could fly and breathe fire, others that were flying serpents with wings, other dragons that came up out of the sea. They were well aware of these creatures and they documented them. More importantly, we know that these black civilizations, if you look at the ancient black civilizations of South America 1,000 years ago, they show themselves with these creatures. If you look at the ancient black civilizations of Europe 500-600 years ago, they show themselves with these dragons. The same can be said for the ancient black civilizations of the Middle East who documented these creatures as well a few thousand years ago. And you have to pay attention to all of the documented evidence left behind by white people showing themselves killing these dragons. You can't ignore all of this evidence that's left behind. And these are so-called dinosaur eggs for sale. These eggs are found all over the world all the time, and they're sold to the highest bidder. You can get a single egg or you can get a whole nest. And these are supposed to be 65 million years old. And the egg on the bottom is supposed to be 70 million years old. And they really expect us to believe that these eggs are 65 million years old, even though by their own admission, they admit that they had one of these creatures in captivity from 1766 to 1918. So just to recap, the U.S. government captures what they call a giant lizard in 1766. Then in 1824, while they still have this giant lizard in captivity, they begin looking for fossils of these giant lizards for the first time. And it was William Buckland in 1824 who became the first person to dig up fossils of what we call a megalosaurus, which means great lizard. Then in 1842, Richard Owen creates the word dinosaur, meaning terrible lizard. Then it wasn't until 1950 that William Libby invented carbon dating. And carbon dating is used to determine the age of fossils, but it can't date anything over 50,000 years old. Then in 1980, a team of scientists led by Walter Alvarez came up with the theory that dinosaurs went extinct 65 million years ago. This theory is known as the Alvarez hypothesis, meaning that the whole 65 million year timeline is not fact but just a theory. So it only took them 200 years and a handful of pseudoscientific methods and theories to convince the masses that these creatures lived 65 million years ago. Even though the very same people who came up with these theories of the so-called dinosaurs are the very same people who documented themselves killing these creatures just hundreds of years ago.